investment opportunities and economic development and getting the big fish here. People at home want to talk about, is my garbage picked up timely? Are the streets clean? Is my neighborhood safe? That's the prosaic side of being a mayor. The other side is, I guess folks think of that as that's the fun stuff, and we're thinking about the future of the city, and it's very important, but you can't lose sight of the prosaic things. Any follow-up? You're welcome.
Sticking on the subject of law enforcement, there are some perceptions I've had, concerns brought to me, particularly from family members, that you can drive certain areas of Alexandria, 2-mile, 3-mile stretches and see 4 or 5 police cars just at any given day. A couple of them set up with the radar guns. Other areas of Alexandria, I know we keep expanding. You could pass through that and almost no police officers at all. In some of those areas, people think you may need to see a couple. How can you reassure citizens that our resources are being proportioned wisely and that those decisions are?
I think that's another really good question and a tough one. There's always some reticence or hesitancy on the part of, I believe, a mayor going in and saying, this is how a police department needs to be run when you have professionals that are determining those things. At the same time, Tom, I see what you see. I see 3 and 4 police cars at times parked together, and I know that they're visiting and talking. They also can be sharing information about something they're about to do. So what a citizen sees in a snapshot could be something that's actually legitimate behavior. I won't say it always is. I don't know. But I will say that I think that this, again, is something that's a process that you're always going through. I know how hard Darren works on these things, and I know that we're constantly having to relook at the models we use and where we need to go for future policing. The purpose of that study is to look at just that. It's to look at operations, organization, the districts, everything in the way in which we structure and allocate police resources, proportionality, if you will. Are we putting them in the right places? All of that will be looked at. It is my intention to also have, and I haven't announced this yet, but this is an appropriate time, a citizen group that could have a former police officer involved and others to look at what that study does and what really is happening interdepartmentally. We have very well paid at this point officers. We have brought them in a relative sense to as high as any in the state. I think we are outfitting them with the right tools. And in exchange for taking care of them, we want to make sure that we're being taken care of in that job. I think, by and large, our police force does that job. I can think of specific people on that force that I would trust my family's life with and know they would walk through any door and do anything to save the life of a citizen, and I've personally witnessed that on more than one occasion. Are there problems? Of course. In any organizational structure, there are going to be. There are built-in problems. There are built-in problems in a city because of civil service rules and all kinds of things that make it tough to work through. And that's a 2-hour conversation about what they are. But I can tell you this. We're moving through that. We have made massive changes in how we deal with civil service on our folks across the board, and I believe that the police are no exception. We have to look at that. I think, again, by and large, our guys do a great job. I think that the sheriff is putting into effect some accountability practices over there. I believe he just announced a drug testing policy that came back 100% clean. I think that's a great thing. I'll highlight one of his guys. During the time of the diesel spill in the command center, a fellow named Tracy Bellino. I've known him for a while, RPSO guy, yeoman's job, that whole set of days, wearing an outfit I wouldn't want to wear and be down where he was working. He didn't smell good, I can tell you that. But he worked hard, and there were just no issues in that whole unified command situation. Everybody working together. I've never seen anything like it. It was a pleasure to work with the sheriff's guys. I think the more we build that trust with those two agencies, the more they help each other and act as a check on each other. I think you are going to see some very interesting policing in the future for Alexandria.
Mayor Roy, I have one more. As you well know, times are tough economically for a lot of families in Alexandria.
Yes.
And you did touch on some of this in your speech. But to put the question to you succinctly, what are you doing as mayor for some of these families and their bottom line, specifically these electric bills?
Well, I think that's another tough question. I think we get asked that question often, and I think in some ways the question makes a characterization that the city is doing something to add to people's utility bills. So I'm going to first address that. Number one, the rates at the city have not changed in years and years. The fuel cost, which is the problem on people's bills, relates to the cost of producing energy and getting it here. That is passed on to us directly. We add nothing to that. We take that and unbundle it to each of you and each business and send it back as it was received. So we're not doing anything in Alexandria to add to those utility bills. It isn't the rate structure that's off. It is actually the fuel cost. That is a national problem, as you know, indeed, in some sense, international. So from a policy standpoint, there are certain things that we can do. One of those is to continue to look at what we do with the Shepherd Center and how we fund and have utility help. I would suggest to you all, find other cities that do the type of help percentage-wise that Alexandria spends in helping people with their utility bills. You're not going to find folks doing that as much. Foster Campbell, I see on the Louisiana Public Service Commission, just made an announcement that he's going to seek help from the governor and legislature to directly intervene, Mike, into people's utility bills. If you talk to the financial planner of the city or the finance director and others, we always struggle with how much of a percent of a budget you can spend on that type of aid. After reading Campbell's call for action and thinking about that question this weekend, looking at my own utility bill and thinking what that would mean to somebody who's not in the same position as I am to afford it, I believe that there are some serious problems. And I believe, again, that politics of desperation I talked about earlier that leads to things, forgive the pun, but it fuels some of those problems. When someone has to choose between an electric bill, medicine, or food, that's a terrible place for us to be. And so I do believe that we perhaps have to look at more aid. And I know to some they will bristle. Why should somebody get aid? Because some people can't afford this. The state had legislation in place. The Public Service Commission had things in place that say right now, in times of crisis, and they include outrageous energy costs, the state can aid. And the Constitution of our state, ladies and gentlemen, directly allows this. There's an exception for spending public money, donating it for those in need. We have policies through the Shepherd Center, Mike, that determine very succinctly and correctly of those who are in need. They have to prove their need, and they can get help. So now it's just a matter of budgeting. How much do you do? Now, in general, in terms of the question of what are we doing to help folks outside of utilities, and I know that's what folks, I think, as much as anything want to hear, I think you have to look at the reinvestment plan that Spark is. You have to look at where we're investing that significant money, why we're investing it there, and how the methodology by which the investments are made. And I believe that no one can question our resolve to help those most in need in our city if you look at Spark and give it a fair read. There's no question. I can stand up here and say that without any worry that someone can counter that with a different notion. That's just a fact. And so I believe that those opportunities to create jobs, real housing, infrastructure investment will be the impetus for a lot of help in those areas. Alexandria is a city that's concerned about its citizens. And I believe we are taking the steps to address some long-standing problems with blight. And we're not afraid to address them, and we're not afraid to call them what they are and move through them. Any of the presentations we give do just that.
Mayor, another budding industry that's we've talked about over the last year a lot has been the movie industry.
Yes.
And I want to know how that's coming along, and specifically with there have been some talks of locating a movie production facility here in Alexandria.
Later today, I think Mr. Hess will be leaving for Shreveport, where Cedric Glover has called a summit on some of the issues involved with attracting film and the film industry to Louisiana. It's one of those things that I've told you before, Tom, it's an arcane industry, meaning it's very secretive. They do things a certain way. They don't like to have their business out there because it's very competitive. And imagine that the folks, the stars, and the things that attract us to that industry, everything they have is in that name, in that persona that they've created. And so some of the things are tough when you think about planning that industry. I'm not talking about not giving you the answer to your question. I'm talking about when you think of how we interact with them and plan for the future, it's an uncertain course, and I think Mr. Pody knows that too. Right now, the governor is struggling with, I believe, or at least what I read, what we're going to do with these tax credits. There's a sunset time at which they cease to exist. And for those at home listening, this movie industry thing, if you will, that's going on in Louisiana, it's about tax credits. It's about money. Right now, if they come and film in Louisiana, it's much cheaper. And what happened was the market in California became more, it was cheaper for them to come here, bring their folks here, and work and film than to do it at home. Governor Schwarzenegger, you will see, and others are really trying to turn that back. And they have a Bring It Home campaign, believe it or not, over there. They want to get the folks back. Now, is it Michigan, Bill? Michigan is offering tax credits that slightly edge out Louisiana's, so they're wanting to get into the business. Now, what does Louisiana have? We talked about niches that we can create. First of all, Louisiana has great sites to film and interesting people and interesting historic places, not just New Orleans, Baton Rouge too, all around us here. I believe we still will be more competitive than Michigan, even if they get theirs credits that way. What would be devastating to us in terms of attracting is if this thing sunsets and we don't have the credits. Because I'm just telling you guys, the bottom line is it's money. These folks are coming here because it's cheaper for them to work and film here. The things that we do to court specifically, one is having a knowledgeable staff about the credits, working with our other economic entities, helping them do site selection. They're big on what they call virgin sites. So they like to go in an area and find sites that have never been on film. It's kind of counterintuitive to me at first. You'd think they kind of would want to go to places where they have, not necessarily the site, but they've worked with governments before. They actually like virgin sites. They like to have something in their film that no one else has. So we're good with that. If you think about Louisiana, in the central Louisiana area, think about how different the topographies just in our region are. You can find what looks like an Arizona desert. You can find what it looks like a forest. You can, I mean, there are just tons of different places. You can stand right out here at the right angle in front of City Hall and look up at this building and the other buildings, and if you look at it at the right angle, it looks like a third of a block of a big city. Then you can take a different view and step back, and it looks like, you know, a small town USA downtown. And those are things they really like. And, of course, they like the Bentley. They love going, when they see the Bentley and go inside that foyer, they're immediately, their interests are piqued. And that's a lot of, I think, some of the things that you'll see. So that's kind of how, I guess in a nutshell, how you court them and why they come. It's really about those taxes. If we lose the taxes, I think you are going to see a quick decline of films being shot in Louisiana.
Speaking of the Bentley, and you mentioned Spark and the things you have planned to help some of these historic downtown areas of Alexandria. We know there are private entities involved with the Bentley, you know, the Weissing-Goldering, which, you know, was purchased over the last year.
Yes.
But nothing's really happened there. What is the city doing to help move those along and come back to life?
The city believes that proper incentives for redevelopment of not only the Bentley Hotel, but of other structures, both related to the hotel and related to downtown development, are appropriate. Indeed, the entire part of Spark that's devoted to providing incentives, and remember, we have those rules. 90% of that Spark money has to be spent on permanently owned public infrastructure to meet general obligation, tax-exempt, municipal bond requirements. So 10% can be spent in what I call softer incentives. Those can be things that work to help developers take down a deal and so forth. We have always intended that Spark, the corridor that would be District 3 roughly, where we are now, the Council District 3, Charles Frederick Smith's district, that there are incentives that can be used to help that deal. Our question, Mr. Bonnet, has been how much help, what are the business judgment considerations going into the deal before you spend $1 of public money, having the right plan in place and having it vetted correctly and everything disclosed on the table, and that's what we think is important to do. Once that process is done, we were asked to get very specific about it a few weeks ago, we can do it. We will in fact be prepared to issue a very detailed analysis of the Bentley proposal very soon. And it won't just analyze what's being asked, it's going to analyze what other models can be done. It's going to analyze what things we should and can be offering. And I want to point out to everybody, the city did offer an incentive package to the Bentley back on May 7th of 2007. So we have always been in the business of promoting the reopening of the Bentley. It's a question of how you do it when you spend public dollars. Again, I go back to the guy on Terra Avenue and the lady on Harvard Street and what they think about that. When you get downtown, it becomes insider baseball. A lot of folks have strong feelings about the things they see downtown, what's government doing, and they talk about that and they lose sense of what is happening out in the rest of Alexandria. Again, you saw Governor Jindal talk about the same thing when he said decisions can't all be driven by Baton Rouge. You have to get outside of that. It's just a larger version of the same thing. The Capitol crowd, and I work there, they have a very different notion about what matters, what's important, many times, not all the time, than folks who are living out in a neighborhood in Baton Rouge or anywhere else in the state. So we're just working through those items. I'll say this, I believe there has been a great deal of political and other maneuvering involved in that has really thwarted the best way in which to address that process. I believe there are objective reasons to support historic preservation and otherwise this hotel. And I believe that there are folks in this city that are quite capable of looking at those issues, getting the right players, stakeholders, if you will, at the table, and coming up with a way to make that happen.
Spark also talks about gateways.
Yes.
You mentioned the gateway with the Alexandria Airport. That's what other gateways are not so great coming over.
Highway 1 coming in?
Yeah, Highway 1 coming in down here and I-49 from the south. You know, what can be done?
I believe that the first gateway I think we should be focusing on, I think it was outlined in Spark as the first one, if not it was the second, I believe it was first, is the Highway 1 gateway. I think that as you come into Alexandria, there's an opportunity for the city to partner with developers in that area and create one-of-a-kind mixed-use opportunities when you have that approach that really open the city up and warm that area up. Right now, to me, Tom, it's a very sterile approach when you come in there. It's not very inviting. As you move it down, it softens a bit with Katie, the school, and other things. But to me, and again, when you talk to the media, you guys will say, okay, there must be specific plans, and there aren't. But just thinking through it, there's an opportunity for a gateway development there. There's an opportunity for more in the middle, possibly at the stockyard. There's an opportunity. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I want to clarify that. There has been no agreement on anything at this point. There's an opportunity for, let's say, a development there, and then imagine the Ruston Foundry as a big-time opportunity for us. So then think about what you've done in the 3rd Street corridor through, and Spark can help do all of this right away. You take 3 very large pieces as you move out of this area where we had already started, well before this administration came along, this Arts and Cultural District started the activity. If you move down 3rd Street that way, and that's always been the desire, take it all the way down 3rd, all the way heading out of town. With those 3 big projects, you are taking an area that has probably been the hardest hit in many ways by blight. I think there are other areas now that are going to be able to lay claim to that stake. It's not a good thing, but it's a fact. but that was traditionally the area we think of as needing this help, and I believe that we will be able to put those infrastructure dollars in place. Sugar House Road, 6 and Foisey, cutting through both ways. We'll have transportation in place, and then with those incentives in place, I believe that you change the entire landscape of that area that has long suffered relatively quickly. And in economic, municipal terms, relatively quickly is, in this new time, 5 to 10 years as opposed to 10 to 30. It used to be 10 to 30. I think that you can move things faster. I'm getting the signal to stop. No, it's not y'all, it's probably...
The trolley buses, how's that?
I think that the trolley buses are secondary or tertiary considerations to all the other things we're doing. We'd like to get other things in place, although I do believe that there is some council desire to go ahead, for example, when we attract teams to come, at least get one in place that could be put on a route and bring people to our zoo and other things. That's something, if we could support that now and do it, to be quite frank with you. That's just something we could do. I never quite understood, there was a little pushback on the trolley idea. You're spending money to make people happy and make them spend more money in your community. It's not a big expense. I support it. I think that it's probably something that we should just go ahead and do, to be honest with you. In city lifetime, though, you can make that statement, and I walk out of this room and something's going to clock me, and then you don't get back to that. So we constantly have to make sure that we stay on track with those items. But again, there are bigger fish to fry right now, and I guess that's why that got tabled a little bit. Anything else? Thank you very much. Thank y'all for coming out and listening.